Arsenal just demolished Man City in the Community Shield final, and this game revealed a lot about where these two teams are going into the new season. In this game, Enzo Maresca had a very clear offensive plan, and he wanted to create an overload in Arsenal's midfield. But the way Arteta set up to defend made it nearly impossible to play through the lines, and in possession they were consistently able to find overloads and break forward. In fact, Arsenal set the tone within the first minute, with a brilliant run from Calafiori into the half space, and finishing nicely past Donnarumma. But we'll take a look at this positioning and Calafiori's role in particular later on. Because what was most impressive in this game was Arsenal's defensive setup, and how it completely nullified Man City's attack. Most of the game was played with Man City in possession in their half, and Arsenal set up in a 4-4-2, but their press from build-up helps us understand the overarching plan from Arteta. With Donnarumma in possession, Man City would rotate quite significantly from their 4-2-3-1. Firstly, the centre-backs would push out wide on the flanks, with O'Reilly and Kusanov pushing forward out wide. Anderson would also move forward into the right inside channel to add support to Phil Foden, while Kovacic was the only holding midfielder in the centre. From this position, Arsenal was strictly in a man-marking setup. Odegaard would sit on Kovacic, while Madueke and Havertz would pick up the two centre-backs. Thomas and Guimaraes would pick up the fullbacks, and one centre-back would break the defensive line to pick up Foden. Early on in the game, we did see some confusion from Arsenal in this position, as Guimaraes was unsure if he should step out onto O'Reilly, as Saliba didn't step forward onto Foden. But eventually they sorted this out, and made it difficult for Man City to progress. This man-marking setup is nothing new, and arguably it's the most common defensive approach used by teams defending from goal kicks. But credit to Arsenal, they were extremely aggressive in this setup. Havertz would rush to close down Donnarumma as quickly as possible, and all the other players were latched onto their opponent and gave them no time to receive the ball. The only exception in the first half was one move early on with Nico O'Reilly rotating far away from his starting position out wide. As he lays the ball off, he continues his run into the centre, giving Man City essentially an extra centre-back, and dragging Arsenal forward, trying to find a way to balance out this overload. Eventually, with three Arsenal players pushing forward and Guimaraes staying on Foden, it frees up a big gap in midfield that Kovacic is able to break into. But the move breaks down before they can create a chance. Now, Man City are still excellent in possession, and even though they weren't able to create a chance from build-up, they were still able to move the ball into midfield. And here is where the majority of the game was played, as we can see from the statistics, with Man City averaging nearly 60% possession in this game. But the low cumulative XG from 12 shots tells you everything you need to know about how Arsenal were able to limit Man City in this position. With City starting their attack, their shape would transition into a 3-1-3-3, which is a system that Guardiola also used heavily at Man City and also Enzo Maresca used at Chelsea. O'Reilly would invert into the left half space, Foden would play behind Haaland, and Anderson would shift into the right half space, with Semenyo and Doku stretching the pitch, and Haaland as usual hovering between the centre-backs. This shape on paper works well for Man City, usually because Haaland is not a player that is going to drop off the defensive line to help the team, so you don't necessarily need to free a gap in the centre for him to drop into. His job is to push the defensive line as far back as possible, so these three players can flourish and have time on the ball. This is also because, on paper, this shape completely overloads the opponent's midfield, as it's a 3v2 in the centre, usually forcing one of the centre-backs or full-backs to commit forward, creating a huge amount of issues if not done at the exact right time. But Arsenal knew exactly how to stop this. Firstly, they would shift out of their man-marking system and move into a more zonal 4-4-2. Here, Odegaard and Havertz were not rushing to close down these players here, but would stay tight in the centre near Kovacic and ensure Man City couldn't go right through the middle. When the ball was in the centre, the two wingers in Madueke and Solis would stay tight near Anderson and O'Reilly, essentially meaning Man City's 3v2 advantage became a 4v3 for Arsenal. So Man City had two free players to move the ball into, but once this pass was made, Arsenal would shift over. In this case, Madueke would step forward, and Guimaraes would shift out wide, with Solis tucking inside to pick up Anderson, ensuring Man City had no free players. What's important to note is that this press forward was not aggressive, but it was always to ensure that this pass forward couldn't be made. For example, take a look at this clip here. Arsenal have ensured play can't go through the middle, but Kusanov has time on the ball, so Solis has to close him down, but he doesn't simply rush forward to apply pressure. Rather, he slowly curves his run to shadow mark Anderson, leaving this central channel completely open for Kusanov to play into if he wants. But because the rest of the players are all being man-marked, there is no one he can pass to. And as soon as Man City start to make any passes backwards, then this is when all of the Arsenal players step forward aggressively, closing down every player and forcing play back to the keeper or intercepting a rushed pass. Essentially, this setup from Arsenal allowed Man City to hold on to possession, but they struggled to isolate players in dangerous positions. Even in moments where they were able to move the ball forward into the wingers out wide, they would rarely find themselves in a 1v1, as the Arsenal winger would drop in, and even one of the centre-backs was free to step forward. So, from Man City's perspective, it wasn't that they were able to isolate their wingers so they could attack the space, but they had left their wingers by themselves with no support to create anything dangerous, essentially forcing them to go back nearly every time. Now, this doesn't mean that Arsenal's defensive shape was completely perfect for 90 minutes. And Man City's shape can still be extremely dangerous if they're able to move the ball quickly, which we did see on a couple of occasions. For example, here we see Man City moving the ball from left to right. In this case, Foden has broken free from Guimaraes and is able to pick up the ball with time to turn. And Solis has pushed forward anticipating a pass into Kusanov, meaning he's not in the right position to stop a pass into Anderson. Once Foden has the ball, he has space to push forward. And because Lewis Skelly wants to protect the half space, Anderson has time to receive and cross into the box, and only narrowly doesn't find Haaland. So in situations where the wingers are cut out of the press, then this 3v2 overload for Man City can become extremely effective. Like we see here as well, with Man City breaking inside, and because Lewis Skelly is on O'Reilly and Guimaraes has been dragged forward from Anderson, then Foden is completely free to receive on the edge of the box, and forces a great save from Raya. So there were certainly moments in this game where Man City showed they can still be extremely dangerous in possession. But most of the problems for them in this game were defensive, and they struggled to keep track of all of the rotations in Arsenal's midfield. With Arsenal on the ball, their shape would also transition away from the 4-3-3 they started in. Most of the time, Lewis Skelly would drop between the centre-backs, and Guimaraes would move as the single pivot, adopting a similar shape to Man City, but rotating in a slightly different way. This meant Odegaard would operate mostly in the right inside channel, and Calafiori would move into the left inside channel. Man City struggled deeply to keep track of these rotations in the centre, and all three of these midfielders would rotate together, often finding themselves on the same side of the pitch. And because Doku would try and close down a pass into Ben White, it often opened up central passes into Odegaard that Kovacic was not able to close down in time, allowing Arsenal to break forward consistently on the right, finding Madueke out wide and building the attack. For example, take a look at this clip here. Doku is on Ben White, and Kovacic can't step forward because of Guimaraes, so Odegaard is completely free, and Anderson in this situation isn't marking anyone. This allows Odegaard to have time to turn, and Arsenal can attack forward, with Ben White overlapping on the flank and his deep cross picking out Calafiori, who narrowly misses the target. On the left as well, I think we need to highlight this partnership between Calafiori and Solis as well, with Calafiori being excellent as the free roaming fullback, often underlapping in the half space, or even adding support in the centre if needed. And Solis did an excellent job at stretching the pitch, but also attacking forward at the right time, just like for his assist into Havertz to make it 2-0. So while the Community Shield rarely tells you anything about what's actually going to happen in the Premier League, it gives you some great insight into what two of the biggest teams in the Premier League have been working on over the summer, and certainly some of the things that they still need to address before the season starts. Especially with Man City and Enzo Maresca, who now find themselves without Rodri in midfield, which is an extremely big problem to address, and one that I feel like Anderson and Kovacic might struggle to fill. But what did you make of the Community Shield final, and ultimately who do you think is going to come out on top this Premier League season? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed the animations in this video, then make sure to check out my tactics software at fmstadio.com.